What's up? Welcome to another book review. But I don't really consider it a book review, but I'm just gonna call it a book review for the time being because I don't know what else to call it. Yay! So, the book that I'm gonna be reviewing is a really short book, and it's the book you saw last week, and it is Albert Camus' The Outsider. And now I am aware that this book has other titles other than The Outsider. The Outsider is just the title for this specific edition, but I know that Vintage Classics calls it The Stranger, and I think most publications call this work a Stranger instead of The Outsider, which is why I kind of struggled finding other book reviews or just any reviews about this book because most of the other books that I found of this novel are named The Stranger. So just a heads up for anybody who wants to read this book. I read this pretty fast because the prose, like the writing, very simple, very easy to fly through. If like okay, well, the writing is very simple. It's straightforward. It's not too complicated. It doesn't have too many flowery words. It doesn't have really that classic language that you see in classic novels, like in Jane Eyre or in Jane Austen's work, or in any work basically in classics. This is very simple. I can't think of any classics that I've read as of like now that have this kind of language, but I'm pleasantly surprised because I really like this. I really like the writing style, so it was easy to read, but it was not easy to process and digest. I'm just gonna say that. So with that, I'm gonna be explaining to you the plot of the book because the plot is what drew me into buying this aside from this gorgeous, gorgeous cover. Like my goodness. So, The Outsider is about this man named Marceau, and he is met with the news that his mother has died at a home for elderly people, and he is seemingly unaffected by his mother's death. And then later on, he gets involved in a violent murder, and he is put on trial for murdering that person. And but like during the trial you can see how differently he is being treated because of who he is or who he acts. So that was basically it. The first sentence was jarring, but I think it like really set the tone really well. The first sentence is just mother died today. It can tell you a lot about him. You can tell that he's straightforward. He doesn't really want to brandish any truths. He is like straight to the point. But there is more in the book about him. But I feel like the first sentence is a pretty good depiction of him. So in the book, he is what is known as an absurdist. And I remember when I was younger, I thought that maybe I could be studying philosophy. But then I think reading this book really like opened my eyes and made me realize maybe philosophy is not for me because I think that this is one of the more simple dilemmas you could deal with when talking about philosophy, and I still really struggle to digest it personally. Like, I know that it's pretty clear cut, pretty straightforward, but the way that Marceau talks, it is so reminiscent of my own thoughts that it scares me because I don't think I would react that way if I were to, say, murder a man, but in his everyday thoughts, it's kind of reminiscent of what I have in my head, and it terrifies me, and it, like, was a struggle for me to process in my head because I was like, wow, is this guy me or am I him? We're not each other. He is a fictional character, I'm a real person. But what I really liked about The Outsider is the trial. It is part two because this book is has two parts. It is part one, it has about 6 chapters, and then part two has 5 chapters. And part one is just basically exposition. It's going to be setting up all the details that you need for part two. And part two is where the climax really happens when he is on trial for a violent murder of a man. and you can really see how his thoughts like go on because he is in prison for a while, and you can see his thoughts for when he tries to escape his final sentence, and also during the trial. But before we get into that, part one is basically the exposition. So we can see that his thoughts are pretty much, how do you say, como se dice, straightforward, not really caring, just thinking whatever he wants to think, and doesn't really care about societal norms. So when Raymond, his abusive neighbor, asks him for help, his thought process is, I don't have any reason to not help him, so I will help him. I don't have any reason not to please him, so I will please him. And I know that I said that his thoughts are very reminiscent of mine, but this thinking pattern is one of the things that is not really, it it disturbs me. It disturbs me personally. And he just goes on with this for the entire book, and it terrifies me because his definition of being okay is not being like he is not being unhappy. It is the I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it just kind of disturbs me that it is the switcheroo kind of like I'm not sad, but I'm not sad kind of logic. And while that works for some people, I think that there is just a little bit of danger in there, especially when you're also thinking about this when you are on a murder trial. So, and what I really didn't like about Marceau really was the fact that he was so just open being to be like a help for someone who is clearly doing damage to people. Like Raymond, he is abusive, manipulative, and Marceau just goes along with it because he doesn't have any reason to not help him. And in the second part of the book, he is shunned for being a bad son because he doesn't conform to the societal norms of what a son should be, what a son should do, and how a son should treat his mother. But in the first half of the book, you can see that, like, even if, like, the second part didn't happen, he is still, like, not that great of a person because I feel like there is harm in not conforming to certain norms because certain norms keep us safe. The point I wanted to make is that social norms are there for a reason. Some social norms are harmful to people and don't make sense, but some social norms are put there to keep people safe, and that is important. And that is why we have conversations about ethicality, about philosophy, and about how we should treat each other because that's important because we don't want to harm each other. But with Marceau, with this kind of thinking that he has, it has the ability to actually hurt people if it's just applied to everyone and everything. I don't have a reason not to do this, so I will just do it. It hurts people to do this, to have this kind of thinking. And some thoughts, I think, in your head should just stay in your head and you shouldn't say it out loud even though you think it. Sometimes it is best to keep your thoughts to yourself. You hear that, Marceau? Please keep some thoughts to yourself. And I know that he keeps his thought to himself, like a lot of times in the book, because he knows what is expected of him societally, but still, and maybe I might just have the opinion of like every single outsider, like outsider of Marceau's life. At this point, I might have the opinion of the public people, of the public eye in this book, but you can't tell me that this doesn't terrify you. Like, I read this and I was absolutely terrified just reading the first part. Imagine how I felt when I read the second part. And this is not to say the book isn't good because it is like, doing all that pizzazz and jazz and stuff. It is an incredibly good book because it like really made my brain think, and it just it like struck me in a certain way. I don't know what it is. It struck me in a certain way, and I would say I would reread this again, honestly. Like, I really liked it, despite me, like, wanting to dunk my head in a bucket full of cold water. Despite that, I still really enjoyed reading it. I think it was a great read, and I think that it is worth for me to look up more analysis to get more background on this, because this is a very interesting novel despite its straightforwardness, and I really appreciate it for what it is. So thank you, The Outsider, for having a gorgeous cover and for having an amazing plot. And yeah, verdict is I like it. I'd recommend it, but maybe not always. I wouldn't always recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to people who don't particularly want to delve into philosophy, because yeah, like I said before, this book made me realize maybe philosophy not for me. So yeah, I enjoyed this book. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I loved reading this, and I'm actually looking forward to watching. I'm actually looking forward to reading more Camus works after reading this one. So yay. Okay, bye.